Angela Lansbury always played the wise one, the dignified one, the protector. But what fans didn't see was how far she went to shield her Murder, She Wrote co-stars. She saw the tensions forming, the cracks behind the camera, and instead of walking away, Angela stepped into the fire. She took the blame for things she never caused. She made statements she didn't mean just to protect others. She smiled through the rumors, while quietly holding the pieces together. Even when producers turned cold, even when the cast started whispering, she stayed silent, because protecting them meant everything. Even if it meant they never truly thanked her. Even if it meant the world misunderstood. She never told the full story. Until now, Angela Lansbury never chased the spotlight. She commanded it. Not through scandal, not through spectacle, but through stillness and strength. By the time she stepped into the role of Jessica Fletcher on Murder, She Wrote, Angela had already spent decades building a reputation as one of the most gracious, dependable women in Hollywood. She didn't just arrive on set each day ready to perform. She arrived ready to lead. Quietly, steadily, without ever needing to say so. Co-stars, crew members, guest stars, everyone who passed through that soundstage knew it. Angela had a presence that grounded people. A way of making even the newest actor feel like they belonged. There were no tantrums, no diva demands, no whispered warnings to stay out of her way. Angela didn't rule through fear. She led through decency. In fact, many younger actors who guest starred on Murder, She Wrote would later say that being welcomed by Angela was the highlight of their careers. She made time to talk to them, asked about their work, encouraged them when the cameras weren't rolling. It didn't matter if you were a veteran or a one-time extra. Angela treated you like a peer, but that grace wasn't weakness, and that kindness didn't mean she was blind. Angela saw what was happening behind the scenes. She understood the quiet tensions that brewed when the cameras were off. She saw the rivalries, the insecurities, the egos. As the seasons went on and the show became a massive hit, the stakes got higher. Contracts became complicated. Egos got bruised. And not everyone on set shared Angela's calm resolve. She could have stepped back. She could have stayed silent. She could have said, "That's not my problem." But she didn't. Instead, Angela became something few actors ever choose to be. A buffer. A shield. The person who would take the heat, smooth things over, and make sure the show went on. Even if it meant quietly cleaning up other people's messes. When crew members clashed, Angela was the one who stepped between them. When tensions rose between guest stars and producers, Angela would pull someone aside, speak to them softly, and the temperature would drop. And when rumors started swirling that certain actors were difficult to work with, Angela didn't fan the flames. She put them out, not because she was obligated, but because that's who she was. There was one story, rarely talked about but quietly passed along over the years, that says it all. A young co-star was nearly removed from an episode after offending a senior producer. The call was almost made, but Angela stepped in, not with anger, but with clarity. She asked the producer to reconsider. She vouched for the actor's talent. And in the end, the actor stayed and delivered a stunning performance. That actor never forgot it. And neither did the people who watched Angela take responsibility for situations she didn't create. Because what the world saw on TV, Jessica Fletcher, calm in the face of chaos, piecing together fractured stories with care and compassion, wasn't far from who Angela really was. She wasn't just solving fictional mysteries. She was managing real ones off-camera behind closed doors. And as the years went on, the weight of that responsibility would grow heavier than anyone knew. On the surface, Murder, She Wrote seemed like one of the most stable shows on television. No scandals, no late-night tabloid feuds. It wasn't the kind of set people whispered about in Hollywood circles. But just because it wasn't loud, doesn't mean it wasn't breaking. Behind those cheerful small-town backdrops and carefully written mysteries, there were quiet cracks forming. The kind no one wanted to admit, not even to themselves. The show had become a hit, an unexpected one. It defied the odds, thriving in a television landscape dominated by action shows, police dramas, and sitcoms. And suddenly, all eyes were on Jessica Fletcher and on Angela Lansbury. That success brought attention, and attention brought pressure. From networks, from producers, from people who believed they deserved a bigger piece of the spotlight. It didn't take long before those pressures started creeping onto the set. Some supporting cast members felt sidelined. Guest stars, many of whom were seasoned actors themselves, felt they weren't being given enough space to shine. Crew members began to feel the weight of long production schedules, tight turnarounds, and rising expectations. And producers wanted more control. Angela saw it all happening, slowly, subtly, the way some people stopped talking between takes, the lingering tension in the air during read-throughs, the unspoken resentment from those who felt overlooked or underappreciated, the network executives who made quiet suggestions that felt more like veiled ultimatums. There was a moment, midway through the show's run, when things nearly unraveled. A writer, one of the early architects of the show's tone, was suddenly removed. No warning, no explanation, just gone. The cast was stunned. Angela especially. She'd worked closely with him, trusted him, valued his voice, and when she asked what had happened, the answers were vague, dismissive. Creative differences, they said, but everyone knew that wasn't the full story. That incident triggered something. Other members of the team began watching their backs. A shift in tone settled over the set. Once collaborative conversations became guarded. People stopped taking risks. They followed orders, smiled on cue. And Angela? She became the one they all looked to, even if they didn't say it out loud. She tried to keep the peace. She'd invite people to her trailer, not to lecture, just to listen. She checked in on cast members who seemed off. She asked producers to be more transparent. And when someone made a mistake, she offered to speak on their behalf before the consequences landed. Because Angela understood something no one else wanted to face. Once a crack starts, it doesn't stop unless someone seals it. And yet, the more she tried to protect the others, the more isolated she became. She wasn't just Jessica Fletcher anymore. She was the show's conscience, the emotional center holding it all together. But that center was starting to wear thin. One insider years later said it best. Angela kept the set quiet because she absorbed all the noise. The public never saw it. The tabloids never caught it. But inside those sound stages, past the warm lighting and the tidy living rooms, there was a woman doing far more than delivering lines. She was preventing collapse. And she knew it couldn't last forever. There was no press release, no headline, no scandal, just a quiet shift behind the scenes, and Angela Lansbury taking the fall for something she didn't do. It started, as these things often do, with a disagreement behind closed doors. A storyline had been pitched, one that would shift the show's tone, make it edgier, more marketable to younger audiences. The producers wanted risk, the writers wanted depth, and the cast? Many were uncomfortable. One particular actor, someone who'd been with the show for multiple seasons, voiced concern. Not in a dramatic way, just honestly, cautiously. They didn't feel the change honored the spirit of Murder, She Wrote. They worried it would alienate the loyal audience who had kept them on air. The next week, that actor was gone, quietly written out. Their character moved away. No fanfare, no closure. Inside the cast trailer, people were stunned. Whispers started. Who had made the call? Was it the network? A power move from the executive producer? Or had someone else pushed for the change? The tension was immediate, and Angela felt it. She saw the way people looked around like anyone could be next. She saw the younger actors pull back, play it safe. Fear was setting in. The sense of family was slipping. And that's when she did something no one expected. She requested a private meeting with the producers. No one knows exactly what was said behind that closed door. But when the meeting ended, Angela emerged and released a quiet statement. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't meant for headlines. But in it, she suggested that she had been the one advocating for the story change. That the shift in cast and tone had been part of her vision for evolving the show. It wasn't true. Not fully. In fact, Some said she had privately opposed the decision from the beginning. But she took the blame anyway. Why? Because she knew what fear could do to a cast. She knew how one firing could lead to silence, then mistrust, then chaos. And if someone didn't absorb the shock, the whole thing could crumble. Angela Lansbury wasn't protecting a storyline. She was protecting the people behind it. And while some saw it as a noble gesture, others took it the wrong way. Producers began questioning her loyalty. The network wondered if she was getting too involved. And even a few cast members, those who didn't know the full story, began to whisper about Angela's growing influence. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. She just carried it quietly. Years later, one former crew member said, Angela took responsibility because she knew no one else could handle the fallout. She lied to keep us safe. It wasn't the first time she had done it, and it wouldn't be the last. In the world of network television, reputations matter more than truth. And Angela, who had built hers on integrity, was willing to risk it just to shield the people around her. She never asked for credit. She never told the press what really happened. She let the rumors swirl. Because for Angela Lansbury, leadership didn't mean being liked. It meant being the one who stood up, even when everyone else stayed seated. And this moment, more than any other, showed exactly who she was. For most fans, Angela Lansbury seemed untouchable. The Iron Lady of Murder, she wrote. Unshaken, always smiling, always in control. But behind the polished interviews and award show appearances, Angela was beginning to feel the weight of what she had taken on. It wasn't just about one cast departure or one story change. It was about the growing awareness that she was holding up something that no longer wanted to be held. The network wanted something flashier. The producers wanted something faster. And the cast? Some wanted out. Others just wanted recognition. And Angela was tired. She never said it. Not in interviews. Not in memoirs. But people close to her began to notice the signs. She stayed on set later, not because she had more scenes, but because she was smoothing over more tension. She spent more time in meetings than in makeup. And the woman who had once come to life the moment the cameras rolled began carrying a quiet heaviness between takes. One director, years later, recalled seeing Angela sitting alone between scenes, staring at her script without reading it. He said, she wasn't studying lines. She was thinking, processing, carrying something. And the hardest part? No one said thank you, because when you carry the emotional load of a production, there's no credit, no applause, no headline that reads, Angela prevented another meltdown today. Instead, she began to be questioned. Why was she so involved in the writing room? Why was she offering feedback on casting decisions? Why did she care so much? The very thing that made Angela beloved, her quiet investment in everything, became the thing that made executives uncomfortable. They didn't say it outright, but the whispers began. That she was too controlling. That she had too much say. That maybe, just maybe, the show needed fresh energy. And Angela? She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. Because she knew if she pushed back, they'd only push harder. So she absorbed it. But it did cost her. Cost her peace. Cost her joy. And over time, it cost her connection with the very people she was protecting. By the later seasons, she began appearing in fewer episodes. It was framed as a creative decision. But those close to her knew better. Angela was pulling back. Not because she didn't love the show, but because the show no longer felt like hers. The harmony she had worked so hard to preserve was gone. And when the show finally ended, there was no grand public statement about Angela's sacrifices. No documentary chronicling the weight she carried. No tell-all book revealing the behind-the-scenes reality. Because Angela would never write it. She believed in protecting the story, even at her own expense. One of her closest friends once said, Angela left that set carrying a dozen stories she never told. And she took most of them with her. The audience never saw the exhaustion. They never saw the betrayals. They just saw Jessica Fletcher. Steady, brilliant, unshaken. But the woman behind her, she paid a quiet price for every smile that show delivered. and she never asked for anything in return. Angela Lansbury passed away just 5 days before her 97th birthday. And when the news broke, tributes poured in from every corner of the world. Actors, directors, fans, writers. But it was the messages from her murder she wrote co-stars that struck a different chord. They weren't just saying goodbye to a legend. They were saying goodbye to the woman who held them together. For years, many had stayed silent. Not because they didn't appreciate her, but because Angela never made a show of her sacrifices. She never made her efforts visible. She never sought attention for what she carried behind the scenes. And because of that, most of the world never knew. But in death, the truth began to rise. One long-time recurring cast member shared, "There were days I nearly quit. There were moments where I broke down. But she, Angela, would find me, say something soft, something strong, and suddenly I could go on. I never told her what that meant to me. I wish I had." Another admitted, "I thought she was just being polite at first. But looking back, I realize she was managing the entire emotional temperature of that set. We were just too young or too distracted to see it." One producer, who worked closely with Angela throughout the later seasons, finally acknowledged the unspoken dynamic. She never once said, "I deserve better." Not once. But she did. Because she was doing the work of 10 people, emotionally speaking. She was our compass. And without her, I don't know that the show would have lasted. Even a few actors who'd only appeared in 1 or 2 episodes stepped forward to share private stories. How Angela had remembered their names. How she'd pulled them aside to praise a line delivery. How she noticed when someone was nervous and made sure they felt seen. None of that made the press at the time, because Angela never wanted it to. But after she was gone, they began to realize what they'd lost. And maybe more importantly, what they had taken for granted. One actor, in a post that quickly went viral, wrote, "Angela took the blows for us. She carried the weight, deflected the politics, kept the mood steady. And we let her. We didn't mean to, but we did. I only hope she knew how much we loved her for it." That sentiment echoed across message boards, memorial services, interviews. They hadn't known what she was protecting them from. They hadn't realized she was choosing to take the blame. That her silence was not submission but sacrifice. There's something sobering about hearing the truth after it's too late to say thank you. But in a way, that's exactly what Angela wanted. Because for her, it was never about recognition. It was about keeping the set safe, keeping the work sacred, and keeping the family together even if she had to break a little to do it. Now, as her former castmates revisit old episodes and reflect on the years they spent working beside her, they see the clues they missed, the tired smiles, the quiet exits, the whispered reassurances, and they carry that now, that knowledge, that debt, because Angela Lansbury didn't just lead a cast. She protected a legacy, and they all know they'll never have another like her. Angela Lansbury didn't need the world to know what she had done. She didn't need headlines praising her loyalty. She didn't need awards for the burdens she carried off camera. And she certainly didn't need to expose the people she once protected, just to tell her side of the story. Because Angela wasn't driven by ego. She was driven by responsibility. By the belief that if you're in a position to shield others, you do it, even if no one ever claps for you. That's why the stories of her quiet sacrifices didn't come out until after she was gone. Because she had no interest in making herself the center of the narrative. She was the center, but only because she chose to be the still point in a storm of personalities, pressure, and politics. From the very first season of Murder, She Wrote, Angela made a decision that would define not just her performance, but her leadership. She would hold the center. She would protect the cast. She would preserve the tone and spirit of the show, even when that meant absorbing blame, soothing egos, and making herself a lightning rod for the conflict she never caused. Cost her, emotionally, professionally, and eventually, personally. But Angela never complained, never retaliated. She simply kept going. And that's why, to this day, her castmates can't talk about her without pausing, without emotion catching in their throat. Because they know, whether they realized it at the time or not, she gave them something they can never repay. She gave them peace. She gave them shelter. She gave them a version of television most people only dream of, a set built on kindness. A show held together by someone who genuinely cared more about others than herself. There are many great performers in Hollywood. There are few great leaders. Angela Lansbury was both. She didn't just solve mysteries on screen. She solved problems off-screen, quietly, gracefully, with no audience and no script. That's the part people didn't see. That's the story fans are only beginning to understand. And now, every time someone rewatches an episode of Murder, She Wrote, they see her differently. Not just as Jessica Fletcher, the brilliant sleuth with the warm smile, but as Angela, the protector behind the curtain, the woman who carried the show in more ways than one, and never once asked for recognition. Because for Angela Lansbury, true grace wasn't about being remembered for what you did. It was about being remembered for why you did it. And that, she did better than anyone. If the story stayed with you, the next one will stay with you even longer. Watch it now.